Once again, Christian greetings to all our valued listeners and viewers throughout the whole world, and more particularly to all Shepherd's Rod believers, and most especially to our beloved brothers and sisters in the United States of America. Special greetings to our brethren in Colorado, in PG Island, in Mexico, Spain, in Africa, to the United Kingdom, and also to our brethren in Australia, and to the rest of the 144,000 living saints scattered abroad. Greetings, and may the good Lord bless you, brothers and sisters. This is our episode number 17 on the subject, the 12 figurative months. I would like to begin our study reading 1 TG number 13 on page 7. As inspiration unrolls the scroll, it is, of course, but to be expected that it will find us surprisingly ignorant of many things. The very reason that it unrolls. If we, therefore, fail to exchange our ideas for the Lord's, then what hope is there for us ever to become enlightened and fitted for eternity? Our ideas are to fall flat, and the Lord's prophecies are to stand high and lifted up. Our duty is to prove God's word correct, rather than to hold tenaciously to our preconceptions and misconceptions until God Himself steps in and put us to shame. 1 TG number 13, page 7. Now, in this study, the 12 figurative months, let us dig deeper so that we could be able to sound the depths of inspiration. I remember the statement in Testimonies for the Church on volume 9, page 151. It says, in your study of the Word of God, penetrate deeper and still deeper beneath the surface. Lay hold by faith on divine power and sound the depths of inspiration. Volume 9, page 151. And since the work of inspiration is accurately constructed according to track number 15 on page 78, saying, from the aforementioned examples, we already see that the time has come for all faithful Bible students after saving truth, to realize that inspiration never does anything vain or careless. Its work is ever accurately constructed, always dependable at face value, and explicit beyond improvement. Track number 15, page 78. And it says here, in two symbolic code 7 and 8, page 10, hence, as there are no useless words in either of the writings, those who desire to know the truth must carefully mark every word. Otherwise, they will never comprehend the truth, and as a consequence, they will be driven by the winds as the waves of the sea, until the winds cease blowing, probation closes, and they be left to sink down in their sins as do the waves in the sea. Two symbolic code, number 7 and 8. Page 10. Now let us concentrate to the subject, the 12 figurative months. To repeat again, the term itself, figurative, then it could not be literal. The word figurative and symbolical are synonymous. So here in track number 5, page 26, symbolical or literal, which? Only when this question is rightly answered will we have the correct interpretation to unlock this great symbolical treasure house of truth. And since God is a God of order, not the author of confusion, 1 Corinthians 14, verse 33, here in page 41 in track number 5, it says, for if every term is not symbolical, how shall we differentiate those which are from those which are not? And how shall we know by which to define the truth? Track number 5, page 41. So, if in the application made, the application are not all symbolical, then the only admissible conclusion is that it could not be the perfect fulfillment of the prophecy, or it is not the particular object in view. And according to track number 5, page 34, fulfilled prophecies are seen, therefore, to be employed by the scriptures only as groundwork for that part of prophecy which is yet to be fulfilled. Or it is called the type or the sample, the groundwork. And to repeat again, here in track number 5, page 32, it says, the statements which must shortly come to pass, recorded in Revelation chapter 1, verse 1, and I will show thee things which must be hereafter, recorded in Revelation 4, verse 1, go to say that the revelation is given with the one particular object in view, of showing the things lying not behind, but ahead of John's time, with reference being made only incidentally to the past, in order to lay the necessary foundation upon which to build the future. And according to the Jambers in 2,191, that the word hereafter, 2,191, therefore, the word hereafter in chapter 4, verse 1, means from the time of the vision, pointing forward to 1844. So, the absolute fact is that the book of Revelation is never been understood. Those people living prior to the time of the end, which is pointing to 1844. And it says here in 2,111, the book of Daniel and the book of Revelation were written especially for the generation living at the time of the end, and not so much for the Roman world. See Daniel 12, verse 4. They had no understanding of the writings that pertain to the last days, and thus could not have profited by them. To us, our page 111, or in other words, it says here in 2TG number 7, page 3, Daniel was told to shut and seal the book even to the time of the end. The book, therefore, was not for the understanding of the people before the time of the end. So then, when the book is unsealed and understood, we may know that the time of the end is come. And the shepherd's rod is very plain that the time of the end, in more specific terms, began in the year 1844. Three symbolic code, 8 to 10, page 8. It says, this time must have begun when the book began to be opened. But if we must declare the beginning of that time in more specific terms, it in a spatial sense began in the year 1844. So not until the time of the end commenced that the book of Daniel and the book of Revelation began to unfold, or in other words, it was scheduled by God that such book will be understood in the period of the time of the end. So it is God who sealed the book, that the people living in the period prior to the time of the end, there is no possibility that they could be able to comprehend the book, for it was sealed by God. And only the author of that book, the original author, which is the Holy Ghost, He is the only one who can open the understanding of such human channel. And since it was already decreed that it must be in the time of the end, not until in the year 1844 that such prophecies began to unfold. But the absolute fact is that the time of the end is divided into two divisions. The judgment that pertains to the dead and the judgment that pertains to the living. And according to 2TG number 12, page 30, it says, the revelation, therefore, is to be more fully understood during the judgment of the living. So, whatever understanding that had been bestowed by God to His people in the period of the judgment that pertains to the dead, for sure, it is not the complete understanding, the complete unfoldment of the plan of redemption, for it is divinely scheduled, the appointed time by which such prophecies will be completely understood. Accordingly, it must be during the judgment of the living. And it perfectly corroborates to the statement in White House Recruiter on page 34 that such message that pertains to the judgment will be completed during the 11th hour. White House Recruiter, page 34, with the completed judgment message during the 11th hour, which is the period of the judgment of the living. And since our subject, the 12 figurative months, is attached to the subject, the trumpets study, according to track number 5, page 74. And it is under the 5th trumpet. And the 5th trumpet, the 6th trumpet, and the 7th trumpet, these last 3 trumpets, according to the voice of inspiration, are Wu trumpets. Now, let us read track number 5 on page 58. It says, the last 3 of the 7 trumpets, being Wu trumpets, unlike the first 4, some great change obviously is to take place between the first 4 and the last 3. So let us study closely. What is that great change which is to take place between the first 4 and the last 3? And these last 3 trumpets, the 5th, the 6th, and the 7th trumpet, are one of the most controversial subject, brothers and sisters. But there is a wonderful truth lies behind this wonderful subject. Now, in order to get the full beam of light, we need to gradually establish some divine principles to be observed concerning the subject of the trumpets. Now, reading track number 5, page 34, it says, in the main, however, the trumpets and the seals portray an event which is future from John's time and which takes place in heaven. Although they also portray kindred events, of these related events, some are contributory and some are consequent to the main prophetic event. The former naturally precede the latter. The former naturally precede and the latter naturally follow it historically. Track number 5, page 34. So, in each trumpet, there must be main prophetic event. Let us distinctly separate the related events, the contributory events, and the events which is consequent to the main prophetic event. But of course, the particular object in view is the main prophetic event. And such main prophetic event, according to the reading, not only to the trumpets, but as well as to the seals, portray an event which is future from John's time and which takes place in heaven. So the particular object in view are the things that takes place in heaven. So the things that takes place on earth could not be the main prophetic event. The main prophetic event is the occurrence in the heavenly sanctuary. And the shepherd's rod admonishes us here in track number 8, page 5. So, correctly to understand this prophetic event in its entirety, we must carefully differentiate the part which takes place in heaven from the part which takes place on earth. Track number 8, page 5. So let us distinctly separate the part which takes place in heaven and the part which takes place on earth. Now, here's another divine principle that we need to strictly observe. In track number 5, page 32, and as well as page 35, I would like to begin on page 32. This basic truth that each period of destruction follows only after a corresponding period of sealing is corroborated by the fact that the symbolical locust, which came up at the sounding of the fifth trumpet, hurt only those men which had not the seal of God in their foreheads. All this shows not only that each trumpet follows its sealing period, but also that the nature of the trumpets reveals the punishment of those who failed to receive the seal in their particular periods. In page 35, it says, naturally then, the first seal must precede the first trumpet, and the second seal, the second trumpet, and so on. Like the needle in the shuttle, rather than that all seven seals must precede all seven trumpets. So, the statement is very plain, brethren, that the basic truth, such divine principles, that each seal, there must be a matching trumpet. And the trumpet is the last warning message to inform everyone that if they will continually reject the message of present truth under its respective seal, they will be punished with such divine punishment. Because according to 2TG, number 13, on page 9, it says, the term trumpet is significant of broadcasting a message. So the term trumpet is significant of broadcasting a message. Therefore, the fifth trumpet must be the last warning message under the fifth seal, by which such message is a divine pronouncement of who? Because the fifth, the sixth, and the seventh trumpet are who trumpets. Now, let us read the statement in 2SR. To SR page 213. So let us read. 2SR page 213. The closing of one seal and the opening of the other consume a period of 30 years. So, in 1500 AD, that is the closing of the fourth seal. So the word closing is the last period of such seal. So let us read again the statement. The closing of one seal and the opening of the other consume a period of 30 years. Thus the fourth seal closed in 1530 AD. So the fourth seal closed in 1530 AD. Therefore, in 1531 AD, that is the commencement of the period of the fifth seal. But the question is that, what period that commenced in 1531 AD concerning the fifth seal? Is it the main prophetic event? Or is it the kindred events? We already read in track number 5, page 34, that the main prophetic event takes place in the heavenly sanctuary. Now, if this event that takes place in 1531 is the main prophetic event, then it is contrary to the proper application of this divine prophecy, the divine principle, that the fifth seal must precede the fifth trumpet. And it was reversed, because the fifth trumpet commenced on the first advent of Jesus Christ. It says here in track number 5, page 79, Christ's first advent and subsequent events, fifth trumpet. Track number 5, page 79. So it was contrary to the proper application, because the fifth trumpet commenced on the first advent of Jesus Christ, and the fifth seal commenced in 1531, by which the voice of inspiration made it so plain that the seal must always precede its respective trumpet. Therefore, it is not the main prophetic event. It is not the particular object in view. So, the main prophetic event concerning the subject of the seven seals is the sealing. According to 2SR 216, at 215, it says, as the six seals have reference to six periods in which the saints were sealed, the seventh must also apply to a sealing period, otherwise it cannot be called seven seal. So the statement saying, as the six seals have reference to six periods in which the saints were sealed, the first six seals pertains to all the saints who experienced death and to be resurrected. It says here in 2SR 202, evidently, the first six seals complete the cases of those who were dead, preceding the judgment, and while it is in session. But the seventh sealing period, being the last, must concern the living. So, the first six seals, brothers and sisters, must be pertaining to the saints that will be resurrected. Now, since our subject is concerning the fifth trumpet, so it must be pointing to the first five seals. And pointing to the main prophetic event. What is the main prophetic event? The occurrence in the heavenly sanctuary. And that is the reason why the shepherd's rod plainly declared in 2SR 187, saying, the seven seals and the sanctuary. In order to make a proper application of the seven seals, we must have a better understanding of the heavenly sanctuary, of the heavenly sanctuary service, its origin, and the object of its existence, as taught by the early sanctuary built by Moses, Hebrews 8 verse 5. In the sanctuary construction and service is revealed the plan of salvation. So there is no possibility that we could be able to make a proper application of the subject of the seven seals unless we have a better and complete understanding concerning the proceedings in the heavenly sanctuary, because the seven seals, the main prophetic event, is in heaven, the proceedings in the heavenly sanctuary. That is the reason why the shepherd's rod says in 1TG 51, pages 5 and page 6, saying, if the church is not commensurably growing and expanding, then how can she be a living church? And how can she keep up with the signs of the times and with the progress in the sanctuary above? If you will read tract number 15, page 5, it says, the seven seals, the signs of the times. The seven seals, the signs of the times. And the shepherd says that the signs of the times, of course, divided into two sections. The signs of the times on earth and the signs of the times in heaven. By which, in reality, that is the main prophetic event, the particular object in view, because the signs of the times on earth, that is only the kindred events or related events or contributory events or the consequent to the main prophetic event. And in track number 15, it says here, I would like to read the statement. In track number 15, pages 57 and page 58, it says, thus it is that while the first four seals, who are they, the first four seals? That is, the first seal, the second, the fourth, and the fifth. The first four seals, if it pertains to the earthly sanctuary, it must be the first, second, third, fourth. That is the first four seals that takes place on earth. The related events, the kindred events, the contributory events, and the consequent to the main prophetic event. The first four seals, it must be first seal, second, third, fourth. But concerning the first four seals in the heavenly sanctuary, it is different. The first four seals, they are those who will be resurrected at the second visible coming of Jesus Christ. Those will be resurrected in Revelation 20 verse 5 and 6 and 1 Thessalonians 4, 16 and 17. And I would like to give you an example here in 1 TG number 11. So it says here in 1 TG number 11 on page 10, it says, the cleansing of the sanctuary, Daniel 8 verse 14, the purification of it by blotting out from the books, Daniel 7 verse 10, the names of those who are found not eligible to come up in the first resurrection, the resurrection of the holy ones, Revelation 20 verse 5 and 6. And for sure, without any doubts, the third seal could not be a part of such resurrection. Because the third seal, that is from Abraham to Jesus Christ, by which all of them who died under the third seal, they will be resurrected in the special resurrection, Ezekiel 37. The shepherd's rod made it so plain in 2SR. So let us read the statement. It says here, 221, only reading the third seal. It says, the third from Abraham to Christ. To SR 221. It's a summary of commencement and termination of seals. And God made a promise to Abraham concerning those bones. And it was revealed to prophet Ezekiel. And the shepherd's rod is very plain. In 2TG number 7, it says here, 2TG number 7, pages 12 and page 13, it says, now to line up all the resurrections, we must take into account also the one of Ezekiel. 2TG number 7, page 12 and 13. Now to line up all the resurrections, we must take into account also the one of Ezekiel. Ezekiel 37, verse 1, verse 11 to 14. Then it says in 2TG number 7, page 13, in this resurrection, only God's own people, Israel, arise with no sinner among them. Moreover, these do not meet the Lord in the air. They are taken to the land of Israel, Palestine. This resurrection, therefore, is not the same as the resurrection of 1 Thessalonians of the Revelation, or of Daniel chapter 12. It must be a separate one. So to repeat again, brethren, we need to familiarize the proceedings in the heavenly sanctuary, and it was well arranged by God under the description of the resurrection. So the proceedings that commenced in October 22, 1844, they are the first 4 seals. Now we are studying now the main prophetic event. To repeat again, the first 4 seals on the earthly sanctuary, that is the first seal, second, third, and fourth. That is on the earth. And commence from Adam to the flood, first seal, according to 2SR 221. Then from flood to Abraham, second seal. From Abraham to Christ, third seal. From Christ to 1530 AD, fourth seal. But that is not the main prophetic event. That is the kindred events. And since we are trying now to focus our whole attention to the main prophetic event, the occurrence in the heavenly sanctuary, so the first proceedings, it was clustered by God by resurrection. And the first group that had been considered in the judgment, it is the first 4 seals. The first seal, the second seal, the fourth seal, and the fifth seal. They are those who will be resurrected at the second visible coming of Jesus Christ under the resurrection in Revelation 20 verse 5 and 6. and 1 Thessalonians 4:16 and 17. But those who died under the third seal, from Abraham to the last apostle in 100 AD, John the Beloved, they will be resurrected under the special resurrection in Ezekiel chapter 37, by which the shepherd's rod declared clearly in 2TG number 7, page 12 and 13, that such resurrection is a separate one. Separate from Revelation 20, verse 5 and 6. Separate from Daniel 12, verse 1 and 2. And that particular resurrection is pointing only to the third seal. So, the fifth trumpet, the main prophetic event, it must be in the time when the proceedings of the third seal, which is the fifth seal, or the fifth group considered in the proceedings in the heavenly sanctuary. That not until their proceedings is completely finished, that is the time by which the complete unfoldment of the message under the fifth trumpet will be bestowed by God. Now, I would like to read here in track number 15, page 57 and page 58. Thus it is that while the first four seals carry us through the periods of the day in which the works of men are made manifest, the last three seals carry us through the day of God, the day in which His truth and His works are made manifest. Of course, such truth is the truth concerning the plan of redemption. Such works must be Christ's mediatorial work in the heavenly sanctuary. When would be the commencement of that unfoldment of the entire plan of redemption? Brothers and sisters, it is during the proceedings in the heavenly sanctuary under the last three seals. And the last three seals, that is the third seal, the sixth seal, and the seventh seal. Or in other words, it must be in the time when the entire proceedings under the first four seals, those will be resurrected on the first general resurrection under Revelation 20, verse 5 and 6, is completely finished, then began the unfoldment, the complete unfoldment concerning the plan of redemption. Now, if the entire subject concerning the fifth trumpet will now be completely unfolded, it will be completely understood at this present time, then there is no other safe conclusion to indicate, brothers and sisters, that the proceedings under the last seal, under the first 5 seals, by which the last seal to be considered is the 3rd seal, those will be resurrected in Ezekiel 37 is already finished. And that is the time that the Heavenly Father, our Almighty God, brothers and sisters, began to speak. According to SR page 222. Now, let us read again. 2SR 222. It says, wheat and barley, each for a penny. Wheat and barley, each for a penny. In our study of the 7 seals, we reserve for future explanation the following scripture. And I heard a voice in the midst of the 4 beasts say, a measure of wheat for a penny, and 3 measures of barley for a penny. Revelation 6, verse 6. Again, we turn the reader's attention to the fact that the voice came from the throne. See chapter 5, verse 11. Therefore, the price of the cereals is fixed by the great judge. There must be something of great importance in these symbols, for the great Jehovah himself is speaking. There are 2 verses mentioned here. Revelation 6, verse 6, and Revelation chapter 5, verse 11. We explained several times that Revelation 6, verse 6, in reality, is signifying the whole Bible. 6 and 6 meaning the 66 books of the Bible. That the statement saying there must be something of great importance in these symbols, for the great Jehovah, God himself is speaking, it is at the time when God the Father fixed the price of the cereals. What does it mean by fixed? Brothers and sisters, it is the same with the statement that the 7th angel begins to sound. That there is time no longer. Since it is one of the deep subject, let us focus first our attention to Revelation chapter 5, verse 11. Remember that according to the shepherd's rod, Revelation chapter 5 is the heart and the key of the subject concerning the subject of the 7 seals. Here in 2SR page 193, it says, thus, we are confronted with the necessity of deeper study on the subject. Reading to SR 193. Thus, we are confronted with the necessity of deeper study on the subject. According to the counsel of the servant of the Lord, we are admonished to study this, for it holds out an important truth for those who shall have a part in the closing of the gospel work. Quoting Testimonies for the Church, Volume 9, page 267. The 5th chapter of Revelation needs to be closely studied. It is of great importance to those who shall act a part in the work for God, of the work of God for these last days. Had the chapter been properly understood, explained, and published before the above testimony was written, there would have been no need for this urgency. Furthermore, if it had been explained in the past, why is the lesson of such great importance? And who is bearing the responsibility of its deliverance to the world? But the 5th chapter, separated from the 4th and 6th, cannot be comprehended. For these chapters contain one subject, namely the 7 seals. The 5th chapter is mentioned because it is the heart and key of the subject. Now, first of all, the reading in 2SR page 222. It is Revelation 6 verse 6. The last verse that pertains to the 3rd seal. The last verse that pertains to the 3rd seal. Brothers and sisters, since we already studied several subjects, this occurrence that God the Father Himself, the great Jehovah, is speaking is at the time when the entire proceedings under the 3rd seal is completely finished, completely accomplished. Then at that time, God the Father Himself is speaking. And there is something great importance. Whatever the words God the Father is speaking. But accordingly, God the Father fixed the price of the cereals. What does it mean by the word fix? I think the word fix, there is already set time. It could no longer be altered. How does the dictionary define the word fix? God the Father fixed the price of the cereals. It says fix fastened securely in a particular place or position. Settle. So there must be fixed date. That's what it means by fixed, meaning it could no longer be altered. What is the price of the cereals? 1 penny. And that is the reward. Brothers and sisters, that is the reward. Now, since the quotation is Revelation chapter 5 attached to Revelation chapter 6 verse 6, then let us follow that statement in 2SR 255 saying, so again, we find that one thing proves another. Or one truth dovetailing another truth. According to track number 5 on page 38. Going on now to understand the symbols, the symbolism, as it thus basically defines itself, the student will see as he proceeds that its subject not only becomes clearer and clearer, one truth dovetailing with another, and all reinforcing the whole, but also that it holds a steering present truth lesson. Now let us look at track number 8. Although it is a long reading, but I will just only read the verses. In track number 8, page 3, page 4, and page 5, and page 6. It is entitled, Mount Zion at the 11th hour. Mount Zion at the 11th hour. And then the quotation is Isaiah 62, verse 1 to 3, Revelation 1, verse 1, Revelation 14, verse 1 to 3, Revelation 4, verse 1 to 4 and 6, then Revelation 5, verse 8, 11, and 12. So here, included Revelation 5, more particularly to verse 11, the very verse mentioned in 2SR 222. To emphasize that it is God the Father who is speaking. And whatever God the Father is speaking, it was relayed by thousands of angels, as stated in Revelation 5 verse 11, saying, and I beheld, and I heard the voice. It did not say, and I beheld and heard the voices of many angels. No. The voice. So it can be easily understood that these thousands of angels, they only speak one voice. And that is the message spoken by God the Father. According to 2SR 222, that it is God the Father who is speaking. But the quotation is Revelation 5 verse 11. Can be easily understood that with one voice, the many angels round about the throne, and the beasts and the elders, and the number of them was 10,000 times 10,000 and thousands of thousands. They speak with one voice. They repeated, they relay the voice of God the Father. Revelation 5, verse 11. And since the voice of inspiration attached Isaiah 61, verses 1 to 3, now let us read 1SR. So it says here in 1SR 154 and 155. In volume 3, page 65 of Isaiah the Gospel Prophet, we read, I will not rest. God is speaking. Undoubtedly, 100%, it is God the Father who is speaking. So the mere fact that Isaiah 62, verse 1, 2, and 3 is attached to Revelation 5, verse 11 in track number 8, page 3, 4, and 5, plainly indicating that in Isaiah the Gospel Prophet, it is God the Father who is speaking. As a matter of fact, accordingly, in 2SR 221, it says, 2SR on page 221, it says, the revelation, we have stated before that the book of Revelation is a revealing of prophecies and not a prophecy of itself. 2SR 221. We have stated before that the book of Revelation is a revealing of prophecies and not a prophecy of itself. 2SR 221. Therefore, we can easily understood that such prophecy recorded in Revelation 6 verse 6 and Revelation 5 verse 11, by which it is God the Father, the great Jehovah, is speaking, is a revelation of the prophecy recorded in the book of Isaiah, in Isaiah 62 verses 1 to verse 3. Now let us read again the statement in 1SR 154 and 155. It says, in volume 3, page 65 of Isaiah the Gospel Prophet, we read, I will not rest. God is speaking. He has determined that the righteousness of His people shall become evident, and He will not rest until it is accomplished. The words indicate not only determination, but also that there has been delay. That now the crisis has come and that God is tremendously in earnest to see the work finished. God intends to exhibit His people to the world. He wants to demonstrate what can be done in human flesh. And He will not rest satisfied until His people reflect His image fully. When that is done, the earth will be lightened with the glory of God. Revelation 18, verse 1. You see, brothers and sisters, so what is the focal point of that description that God the Father, the great Jehovah Himself is speaking, and He will not rest until such eternal divine purpose of Jehovah will be finally be carried out. And I do fully believe that it is also closely connected to the subject in Daniel chapter 9. To bring everlasting righteousness. I would like to read 1 TG. In 1 TG number 42, on page 4, it says here we are told that the Lord will continue thus to speak, not for the sake of the world, but for the sake of the church, so that she may eventually stand on Mount Zion with the Lamb. That He will thus continue until the righteousness thereof go forth as brightness, and the salvation thereof as a lamp that burneth. 1 TG number 42, page 4. Now, I would like to read track number 1. And I think track number 2 rather. And here we can really appreciate how God linked one truth to another. Now here in track number 2, page 19, it says, do not, my brethren, say, the vision that he seeth is for many days to come. And he prophesied of the times that are far off. For the days are at hand, and the effect of every vision. Ezekiel 12, verse 27, verse 23. For Zion's sake will I not hold my peace, says the Lord. And for Jerusalem's sake I will not rest, until the righteousness thereof go forth as brightness, and the salvation thereof as a lamp that burneth. Isaiah 62, verse 1. Now here, the shepherd's rod attach the vision of Isaiah in Isaiah 62, verse 1 to 3, to the vision of Ezekiel, chapter 12, verse 27, and verse 23. And here the shepherd's rod admonishes to each any individual that do not, my brethren, say, the vision that he seeth is for many days to come. that statement can be easily understood that when God the Father is speaking, at the time when the judicial proceedings under the third seal is finished, as attached on Revelation 6 verse 6, the last verse of the description under the third seal, that is the time that God the Father fixed, meaning there will be no more delays. Because the statement is very plain in 1 SR 154, saying the words indicate not only determination, but also that there has been delay. There has been delay. And such delay is permitted by God for one purpose: to bring all men to repentance. But there is a limitation of such delay. That such limitation is illustrated at the time when God the Father began to speak. And at that time, there will be no more delay. And that is one of the significance of the last three trumpets being woe trumpets. Woe unto them who will say that this prophecy will not be fulfilled. Do not, my brethren, say that God's servant is prophesying too many days. Think it thoroughly, brothers and sisters. Because without any doubts, this prophecy will be fulfilled. And according to 1 TG number 5, page 14 and 15, and when this cometh to pass, lo, it will come. Then shall they know that a prophet hath been among them. Ezekiel 33, verse 30 to verse 33. 1 TG number 5, page 14 and 15. The last part. And when this cometh to pass, lo, it will come. Then shall they know that a prophet hath been among them. Ezekiel 33, verse 30 to verse 33. Now let us go back again to our main subject concerning the fifth trumpet. Whatever understanding that God hath bestowed to Beti-Hotep in his lifetime, for sure, that is only the groundwork. That is not the particular object in view. For there is a divine decree, there is a divinely appointed time by which the particular object in view must be revealed. And that is the time when the proceedings of the third seal as the fifth one to be considered in the proceedings in the heavenly sanctuary, by which the proceedings of the fifth seal must precede the occurrence of the fifth trumpet. And at the time when the proceedings of the third seal, the fifth section, in the judicial proceedings in the heavenly sanctuary is finished, then God the Father began to speak and woe unto them the pronouncement of the woe under the fifth trumpet. I would like to read first the statement in track number 5. On page 58. Track number 5, page 58. The last 3 of the 7 trumpets, being woe trumpets, unlike the first 4, some great change obviously is to take place between the first 4 and the last 3. What is that great change, brethren? First of all, I think that is pointing to our main subject. The great change is that in the occurrence on the earth, brothers and sisters, as stated by Jesus Christ in Matthew chapter 5 on verse 21, saying, Ye have heard that it was said by them of old time. That's not the verse I'm looking. Saying that Matthew chapter 5 let me verse 38. Matthew chapter 5 verse 38. Ye have heard that it hath been said, an eye for an eye, and a thought for a thought. Exodus 21 verse 24. But I say unto you, that ye resist not evil, but whosoever shall smite thee on thy right cheek, turn to him the other also. So this is the illustration of the great change from Old Testament to the New Testament. Or in other words, in the New Testament, vengeance is deferred to grace. But that is not the perfect fulfillment. Because in Luke 21, let us read again the statement. In Luke chapter 21, on verse 20 to verse 24, it says, And when ye shall see Jerusalem compassed with armies, then know that the desolation thereof is nigh. Then let them which are in Judea flee to the mountains, and let them which are in the midst of it depart out, and let not them that are in the countries enter thereinto. For this be the days of vengeance, that all things which are written may be fulfilled. And we know that that was in 70 AD. So, if we'll be saying that from Christ's resurrection onwards, there is no days of vengeance, it is not true in the history. Because in 70 AD, that is the days of vengeance according to the voice of inspiration. And secondly, we already explained that the proper application of the prophecy as the main prophetic event, the seal must always precede with the trumpet. But in that arrangement, the fifth trumpet occurred in the days of Jesus Christ's first advent, whereas the fifth seal commenced in 1531. Hundreds of years, the gap of time. So the proper application of the prophecy must be applied only to the main prophetic event by which the occurrence takes place in heaven. According to track number 5, page 34. So it must be at the time when the fifth section of the proceedings in the heavenly sanctuary, which is the third seal, those will be resurrected in Ezekiel 37. The entire proceedings of that generation from Abraham down to the last apostle who died are completely finished. Then God the Father began speaking, and when God the Father began speaking, the fifth trumpet in its perfect fulfillment, in its direct fulfillment, the woe had been pronounced. And if you read the Bible, in Revelation chapter 9, Revelation chapter 8, verse 13, before the fifth angel sounded, it says here in verse 13, Revelation 8, verse 13, and I beheld and heard an angel flying through the midst of heaven, saying with a loud voice, Woo, 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 to the inhabitants of the earth, by reason of the other voices of the trumpet, of the three angels, which are yet to sound. Therefore, the angel flying through the midst of heaven is not the angels or the voices of the three trumpets. Because the statement, it says, other voices of the trumpet of the three angels, which are yet to sound. Now, there is no other angel that fly in the midst of heaven except the three angels' messages. Brothers and sisters, right? And the same description, saying with a loud voice. Here in Revelation 14, verse 6 and 7, and I saw another angel fly in the midst of heaven, having the everlasting gospel to preach unto them that dwell on earth, and to every nation and kindred and tongue and people, saying with a loud voice, Fear God and give glory to Him, for the hour of His judgment is come, and worship Him that made heaven and earth, and the sea, and the fountains of waters. And the same with the third angel. And the third angel followed them, saying with a loud voice, so brothers and sisters, we know that this angel is not a literal angel. It is a messenger. And the description flying in the midst of heaven, in the judgment that pertains to the dead, it was illustrated that the message is sent through reading materials, illustrated as the leaves of autumn. According to Testimonies for the Church, Volume 9, 222. But the direct application must be in the judgment that pertains to the living. That the illustration flying in the midst of heaven, according to the shepherd's rod, that is pointing to the modern technology, the modern science. It is through internet. Let's read the statement in 2SR 229. God has inspired modern science to invent and build speedy equipment to quickly finish His work. The same with the statement in White House Recruiter, page 36, saying, because time and the gospel are at their climactic hour. Do not forget the statement in 2SR 266 that only by the gospel proclamation can God save His people through that spiritual house. The gospel represents the present truth. Therefore, the final proclamation of present truth, the climactic hour, must be the proclamation of the present truth under the seventh seal, the 11th hour. It says, because time and the gospel are at their climactic hour, and the work is consequently of transcendent scope, expansion, and importance, yet of exceeding short duration. God has inspired men to invent and build time and labor-saving, wonder-working, earth-mastering tools and machinery of all kinds, marvels which would have staggered the imagination and beggared the credulity of former generations. Notwithstanding that centuries aforehand the high and lofty one that inhabit eternity, Isaiah 57:15 declared, but thou, O Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book. Even to the time of the end, many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall be increased. And do not forget, my dear beloved brothers and sisters, that the trumpet study are symbolical prophecy. Then if it is symbolical prophecy, then the inhabitants of the earth mentioned here must be pointing directly to the symbolical earth, not literal earth. The same with the statement in Revelation chapter 12 on verse 12. Therefore rejoice ye heavens, and ye that dwell in them. Woe to the inhabitants of the earth and of the sea. If you will say that the earth here is literal, then the sea must be literal. Is there any human being residing at the bottom of the sea? This is symbolical. Therefore rejoice ye heavens, and ye that dwell in them. woe to the inhabitants of the earth and of the sea. For the devil is come down unto you, having great wrath, because he knoweth that he hath but a short time. And that is the reason why this message is especially directed to the United States of America. Because the very first one that had been mentioned in Revelation 7 verse 3, saying, hurt not the earth. Revelation 7 verse 3. The very first one that had been mentioned is the earth. Hurt not the earth, neither the sea, nor the trees, till we have sealed the servants of our God in their foreheads. The trees represent leadership. So the focal point of the hurting in Revelation chapter 7 is the leadership. And first of all, directed to the earth, to the symbolical earth. And this is the message. Loud voice meaning clear message. And what does it mean by the pronouncement woe? Now let us read the shepherd's rod. In track number 5, page 58. It says, having up to this point brought us to the destruction of the first temple and on to the building of the second. So it's pointing to the temples type, the two literal typical temple. It says, having up to this point brought us to the destruction of the first temple and on to the building of the second. The prophetic word of God leads us on now to the first advent of Christ and to His crucifixion. The next great events associated with the trumpets. And these events ushering the Old Testament era out and the new one in. Now, what is the last seal under the Old Testament? The third seal. But that is the kindred events, the groundwork. Brothers and sisters, the particular object in view occurred in the heavenly sanctuary, indicating that when the proceedings of the third seal is completely finished, then that is the time that ushering in the Old Testament era out and the new one in. Disclose that the last three trumpets embrace the history of the New Testament period. The woes consequently point first to Satan persecuting the faithful in his endeavor to keep them from embracing Christianity. So the woes are categorized only into two classes. First, if you will persecute someone, if such someone is joining the true movement and you are making all you can to hinder him or to hinder her to join the true movement, woe unto you. And second, to his persecuting the heathen in his endeavor to Christianize them. The second woe is that Brothers and sisters, you are doing all you can to let someone join in a false movement. Brothers and sisters, to Christianize them by which such Christianity is a polluted Christianity. And I think it is also closely connected with the very words of Jesus Christ in Matthew 23. Let us read Matthew 23 verse 15. Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For ye compass sea and land to make one proselyte, and when he is made, ye make him twofold more the child of hell than yourselves. We know that this was not true to the Pharisees of old, to the scribes anciently, because they did not compass sea and land to convert anyone. Contrariwise, they don't believe that the Gentiles, brothers and sisters, is a part of such great salvation. And Desire of Ages says they monopolize the salvation. They thought that they were the only nation which is have such privilege to obtain salvation. But rather it points out to the modern scribes and Pharisees, by which they travel from sea to sea, land, and from one place to another. Brothers and sisters, just to convert such a one into a false movement. And who unto them? According to the voice of inspiration. Now let us go back to our main subject. It is concerning the 5 figurative months. The focal point of such subject, the 12 figurative months. And according to our reading in track number 5, page 74, the focal point is the beginning of the harvest, by which the 144,000 are sealed. But the harvest is only in 2 sections. The first section is pointing to the Laodicean church, and the second section is pointing to Babylon. According to track number 3, page 70 and page 71. On page 71, it says, this being the dreadful experience, that is Jeremiah 8:20. According to track number 3, page 70. It says, the second section of the separation thus being completed, provisionary time is closed, whereupon from the wicked will be heard the horrible wail and doom. The harvest is past, the summer is ended, and we are not saved. Jeremiah 8 verse 20. This being the dreadful experience of the tares in Babylon, in the second section of the harvest, there must, as a type, be a similar and precedent experience for the tares in the Laodicean church in the first section of the harvest. So the harvests are divided only into two sections, but in each sections divided into two divisions, beginning and closing, or beginning and ending. And we already explained that the beginning of harvest, such sealing occurred in the heavenly sanctuary. And the second section of the harvest, which is the ending, such sealing occurred on the earth. And that is why the Shepherd's Rod says in 1 SR page 29, the 144,000 has a double seal, by which the first phase of the sealing is the present truth, as stated in 1 SR page 28. And only those who accepted the present truth, that their names will remain in the Lamb's Book of Life, that their names will not be blotted out. But those who rejected the present truth, their names will be blotted out. And we explain several times that the vision that was shown by God to Sister White in Early Writings, page 38, by which according to such vision, when Jesus Christ pleaded with God the Father, at that time Jesus Christ gazed on pity on the remnant which were not yet sealed. Why is it that they are called remnant, in spite of the fact at the time that they were not yet sealed? The Shepherd's Rod defined the word remnant in 1 SR 103, that the definition of remnant is that the one that is left after the separation, or after the removal, or after the destruction. But it could not be destruction, because there is no such destruction at the time when the 144,000 were not yet sealed. They are called remnant because their names remain in the Lamb's Book of Life after such removal. The final day of atonement. And that is also stated very plain in 1 TG number 6, page 38. Only the holy ones whose names left written in the Lamb's Book of Life, they are the only ones who constitute the remnant, and they are the only ones who can escape the destruction of the sinners in the church. 1 TG number 6, page 38. So the vision that was shown by God to Sister White is plainly indicating that immediately after the blotting out of names, of all unworthy names, on that final day of atonement is finished, and those names that had been left written in the Lamb's Book of Life, at that time on the earth, they were not as yet sealed by the seal of protection. They were not as yet marked with the mark of deliverance. So the vision that was shown by God to John the Beloved in the island of Patmos, that the angel is waving something up and down in his hands, in Revelation 7, verse 3 and 4, that is the names that had been left written in the Lamb's Book of Life, by which Jesus Christ pleaded with God the Father to hold the winds until the servants of God, all of them, will be granted with the seal of protection. And that is the closing of the harvest, by which at the beginning of the harvest, the 144,000 are sealed with the present truth. And because of that seal, their names left written in the Lamb's Book of Life. And then the next period of the harvest is the closing, the ending. And that is the time by which they will be sealed by the seal of protection. As stated by the Shepherd's Rod publications. And it is completely portrayed and revealed by God by this subject, the 12 figurative months and the 40 typical days, or the figurative 40 days. That is very plain, brothers and sisters. And since the Shepherd's Rod admonishes us that in order to completely comprehend the subject of the 5 figurative months, let us go to the parable of the harvest, so that to find the full explanation of the 5 months period. Track number 5, page 74. It says, to the parable of the harvest, then we must go for the full explanation of the 5 months period. Now, we explained several times that the gospel history, such period is divided into 3 divisions: sowing, growing, and harvest. First to TG 44, 32, and 33. And the Shepherd's Rod admonishes us in track number 3, page 54, that must together be perfectly calculated in order to illustrate the spiritual kingdom. What is the spiritual kingdom? That is the sealing that takes place in the heavenly sanctuary. The spiritual kingdom is pointing to the names that had been left written in the Lamb's Book of Life, the subjects of the premillennial literal kingdom. the 144,000 living saints, as stated in TM page 422. And only those who will be a part of that spiritual premillennial kingdom could be a part of that literal premillennial kingdom. So the shepherd's rod is even more emphasizing the spiritual kingdom, because once you fail to be a part of that spiritual kingdom, then all your hope is completely gone. There is no more possibility that you could be a part of that glorious, literal, premillennial kingdom. Now, the voice of inspiration says, let us read again, track number 3. On page 54, it says, this parable, therefore, illustrates by the 12 months of the year a period of gospel history, in the closing of which the kingdom of Christ is to be set up, and the beginning of which is the seed sowing time. So, the gospel history, the period of the gospel history is illustrated by the 12 months of the year. It did not say the 12 months of a year, but the 12 months of the year, definite article, pointing to such a specific year by which the kingdom of Christ is to be set up. When? In the closing. It says, in the closing of which the kingdom of Christ is to be set up. What kingdom? The spiritual kingdom. Before the literal premillennial kingdom is set up, the spiritual kingdom must be set up first. And it was not set up in the beginning of the seed sowing time. We already explained yesterday that according to track number 3, page 58, it says that 3.5 years from the beginning of Christ's ministry to his crucifixion being the sowing time. How many years the sowing time? 3.5 years. Or 42 months. Or 1,260 days. That statement is very plain. Now, the question is that, when does the beginning of such sowing time? The answer is found in track number 3, page 56. As his ministry, his sowing of the good seed, the truth began right after his baptism, and the quotation is Matthew 4, verse 17. What is Matthew 4, verse 17? That is after the 40 days wilderness temptation. It says, as his ministry, his sowing of the good seed, the truth began right after his baptism. Matthew 4, verse 17. Therefore, to establish the beginning of the parabolic harvest period, we must ascertain the date he was baptized. As I've said, there is a great truth lies behind that paragraph. Why is it that we need to ascertain clearly the date by which Jesus Christ was baptized? The answer is also found in track number 3, page 57. That Jesus Christ was baptized on October 16, 27 AD. Now the question is that, when does the wilderness temptation commence? It is answered in answerer number 3, page 13, October 18. And Jesus Christ was baptized in October 16. Now please project that diagram that you made yesterday. Because you did not give me a copy. I think that is not the one. Yeah. Let me see. Now, I would like to focus first here in number 164, the coincidences. And ponder deeply, brethren. This is 2780. Jesus Christ was baptized on October 16, Friday, 2780. The wilderness temptation began on October 18 and ended on November 27. Therefore, it must be November 28 onwards, by which that is the beginning of Christ's ministry, as stated in track number 3, page 56, Matthew 4:17, after the 40 days wilderness temptation. Now, there is a time discrepancy. Because if you will begin in November 28, 27 AD, up to the crucifixion, then it could no longer be 3.5 years. It could no longer be 1,260 days. Why is it that it is very important that we need to establish the date by which Jesus Christ was baptized? That is October 16, 27 AD. Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. 3 days to the commencement of the 40 days wilderness temptation. The same with the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. April 16, 1718. Friday, Saturday, Sunday. 3 days before the commencement of the 40 days of Christ's personal ministry. To the 120 disciples. But the shepherd's rod made it so plain that the entire period of the sowing is 1,260 days. So that, in that illustration, brothers and sisters, we can easily discern that such 3 days from October 16, 17 to 18, as well as April 16, 17 to 18, these 3 days, they are symbolical. And we know that in prophecy, 1 day is equivalent to 1 year. And it is closely connected to the subject, 3 days and 3 nights. Right? Exactly 72 hours. Christ's suffering, which is the focal point of the subject in 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 11 to verse 13. Now, I would like to show to you this diagram, and the diagram then, you had been corrected. So in this diagram, brethren, the second day of the feast, the most important part of the prophecies that had not been revealed in the days of Figurative. The mere fact that God did not bestow to Figurative such complete understanding by which he himself had not been able to reconcile. Why is it that the Desire of Ages, page 77, and Patriarchs and Prophets, 539, says that it is on the second day of the feast that the sheep is presented before the Lord? Because the only understanding that Figurative has is the resurrection of Jesus Christ, by which at that time, when Jesus Christ was resurrected, it was in the 4th day of the feast. Now let us read again. Brethren, three symbolic code, 8 to 10, page 11. Now the only disagreement between the shepherd's rod and the Desire of Ages on this subject is that the Desire of Ages says that on the second day of the feast, the first fruits of the year's harvest, a sheaf of barley, was presented before the Lord. The Desire of Ages, page 77, which places the first feast of the Passover on the Sabbath. So Figurative is very plain that if the sheaf of barley was presented before the Lord on the second day of the feast, therefore April 15 will fall on Saturday, which is the first feast. Numbers 28 verse 17. Let us read Numbers 28 verse 17. It says, and in the 15th day of this month is the feast. 7 days shall unleavened bread be eaten. So, the Passover feast, the first feast, must be April 15th. But Figurative is trying to explain here that the 15th on the year by which Jesus Christ was resurrected is Thursday, not Saturday. Now, let us read again the statement. 3 Symbolic Code, 8 to 10, page 11. It says, now the only disagreement between the shepherd's rod and the desire of ages on this subject is that the desire of ages says that on the second day of the feast, the first fruits of the year's harvest, a sheaf of barley, was presented before the Lord. The desire of ages, page 77, which places the first feast of the Passover on the Sabbath, Numbers 28, verse 17. Thus making the slaying of the lamb and the 14th day, Exodus 12, verse 6, fall on Friday, whereas the shepherd's rod places the slaying of the lamb on the 14th day on Wednesday. The first feast on Thursday, the second feast on Friday, and so on. Therefore, in view of the fact that the shepherd's rod and the desire of ages are here at variance, and that we believe both to be inspired, we must necessarily go to the Bible to prove which is the correct day and how to harmonize the two volumes. Thus, laying aside both the shepherd's rod and the desire of ages, we go for witnesses to Mark and John. But there is no disagreement between the shepherd's rod and the writings of Sister Wine. They were in complete and perfect harmony. The only thing is that B.T. Hotep had not been able to resolve the issue. He had not been able to give complete explanation for the thing that it seemed in contradiction, in discrepancy. And the only answer that we can give is that because it was not present truth in their time. 1 SR page 13. Because it was not present truth in their time. That is the only answer that we can give. And B.T. Hotep, in 1 Symbolic Code, number 6, page 7, although the quotation here is Patriarchs and Prophets, page 539, but the statement is almost the same on the second day of the feast. Now, you can read the entire 3 paragraphs, but I would like to read only the last portion. Page 6 of this issue, in answering a question in regards to the length of time from the day Jesus ate the Passover to the crucifixion, proves that he ate the Passover feast with the 12 on Wednesday night, and that he was resurrected on Sunday morning. That is, on the day the sheep was to be presented before the Lord. This proves that the words on the second day of the feast, the first fruits of the year's harvest, were presented before God. Patriarchs and Prophets 539 could not mean the day after Jesus ate the Passover. However, thus far, we are not able to give a better explanation of Patriarchs and Prophets 539. The prophet himself humbly confesses that he had not been able to give a better explanation concerning that issue, the second day of the feast. Why? Because it was not present truth in their time. But at this time, it is fully explained and fully unfolded. The mere fact that in the 5 books of Moses, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, brothers and sisters, the statement given in the Bible is very plain. Tomorrow after the Sabbath. So what is that? Tomorrow after the Sabbath? Sunday. And that is directly applied to such event by which the wave ship is presented before the Lord on the second day of the feast, because the statement, tomorrow after the Sabbath. Therefore, the first feast must be Saturday. And that is pattern number 2. The second day of the feast. Now, brothers and sisters, I would like to first, I would like to read the statement herein. Seventh-day Adventist Bible Commentary, Volume 1. And it is concerning Leviticus. It says here, Leviticus. Bible Commentary, Volume 1, page 804. The morrow after the Sabbath, Leviticus 23, verse 11, was neither unholy convocation nor a Sabbath in type or antitype. Yet an important work was done on that day. When Christ arose on the first day of the week, He ascended to the Father to hear the words of God's acceptance of His sacrifice. Now, brothers and sisters, it says, tomorrow after the Sabbath, that is the second day of the feast. So if we will take the Bible just as it reads, then we can easily discern that I do fully believe that they offered a wave ship on pattern number 4, pattern number 5, and pattern number 6. Let us look at pattern number 4. We already, the enumeration, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. When the wave ship is offered, so in pattern number 4, that is on the third day of the feast, April 17. Pattern number 5, on the 7th day of the feast. Pattern number 6, on the 4th day of the feast. And this is the Bible pattern calendar on the year by which Jesus Christ was resurrected. And the first section of the Exodus under Moses celebrated the Passover only 3 patterns, pattern 4, 5, and 6. Pattern number 4 while in Egypt. Pattern number 5 and pattern number 6 when they were already in the wilderness. And after the celebration of pattern number 6, they were no longer allowed to observe the Passover feast for 38 years, according to the Bible and patriarchs and prophets. And we already explained that the very first Passover after Moses died, under the sole leadership of Joshua, that is 1451 BC, pattern number 2, on the second day of the feast. Therefore, Leviticus 23 verse 11 is a prophecy. Brothers and sisters, that is a prophecy. And we will show to you that missing number, how many missing number in the 3.5 years of the sowing time? At least 43 from the baptism of Jesus Christ. 16, 17, and 18. Then 18 to 27, 40 days. Jesus Christ did not preach the gospel. The beginning of His ministry, that is after the wilderness temptation. And that missing number is found in the closing period of this gospel history, brothers and sisters, by which the spiritual kingdom is to be set up. And we will show to you, brothers and sisters, exactly that statement in track number 3, page 58, 3.5 years sowing time. In the beginning, there are only 1,260 minus 43. Therefore, there are only 1,217 days. And in order to complete 1,217 days or 1,218, you need at least, brothers and sisters, 42 or 43 days. Exactly 1,260 days divided into two divisions. The beginning of Christ's ministry and the closing of Christ's ministry, which is the fulfillment of Isaiah 61, by which that is the time when the day of vengeance will no longer be omitted. Because in the beginning of Christ's ministry, He omitted the phrase, the day of vengeance. In Desire of Ages, right? Desire of Ages, page 240. It says here, and that is in the synagogue of Nazareth. And that occurrence, brethren, we know that that is after the wilderness temptation. So let us read the statement. It says, when Jesus in the synagogue read from the prophecy that is in Luke 4, verse 16. And you can read Luke chapter 4, verse 1 onwards. That is the 40 days temptation. When Jesus in the synagogue read from the prophecy, he stopped short of the final specification concerning the Messiah's work. Having read the words, to proclaim the acceptable year of the Lord, he omitted the praise and the day of vengeance of our God. Why? Because vengeance is deferred to grace. But that is only the groundwork. Brothers and sisters, as stated in track number 5, right? That is during the fifth trumpet, the figurative months. Track number 5, page 75, these several linked facts present a solid chain of evidence that in the Christian era, during the 5 figurative months, God has deferred His vengeance to grace. But we will prove to you that brothers and sisters, that is during the symbolical 3 years. Or the symbolical 3 days, but it was equivalent to 3 years. Illustrated by Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And it is the fulfillment of the statement here in 1 SR 153. The first verse and part of the second apply to Christ Himself at the beginning of His ministry. The spirit of prophecy says it will repeat itself with the people of God. This would find its fulfillment in the time of harvest with the 144,000. Those who escaped the ruin of Isaiah 59 and 63, by whose effort the great multitude of Revelation 7 verse 9 is made. Isaiah 61 verse 1 and 2 will be repeated itself with the people of God. And that is with the 144,000. Isaiah 61 verse 1 and 2. By which in the perfect fulfillment of the prophecy, after the acceptable year of the Lord, immediately follow the day of vengeance. By which according to the shepherd's rod, the day of vengeance, brothers and sisters, that is prophetic. It says 154 in 1 SR, the day of vengeance in Isaiah 61 verse 2 follows the year. The day may be prophetic, in which in that case would mean a literal year. Thus it would mean a year in its case. And that is the great and dreadful day of the Lord. According to track number 4, on page 60, it says, in an effort to save our brethren from the imminent vengeance of God, the great and dreadful day of the Lord. Track number 4, page 60, page 61. We will continue this subject, brethren, and we will show to you, brothers and sisters, that such prophecies are perfect. The 3 days, which is symbolical, pointing to the 3 years. The last 3 years, brothers and sisters. So, hoping God would bless us and would help us, and hoping that you will abide listening and viewing this program. We are living in a very nick of time. The time remaining for our provision is getting shorter and shorter. So hoping that we will try all our best to prepare our lives so that we will be among those righteous whose names left written in the Lamb's Book of Life. Thank you very much for listening and viewing this program. May the good Lord bless you and have a beautiful, wonderful evening.